Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mind-body medicine, psychoneuroimmunology. Um, so take a look at this. During World War II, there was a group of physicians treating soldiers that were injured during a beachfront assault, and what they found was that uh, not necessarily immediately upon when the soldiers first came in, but over the next few days, over the next week, the men with the more serious injuries actually needed less pain medication than the men with the less serious injuries. So why is it that the men that had the more serious, the soldiers that had that had more significant injuries, actually need less pain medication than the men that had the relatively insignificant injuries? And it took them a while to figure it out, but what they came up with and what they figured out was that the men with the more serious injuries knew that they were going home. That was their ticket out of the war. The men with the less serious injuries knew that they were going to have to go back and fight. So this was one of the first really well documented cases in Western medicine of just documenting that stress can have a significant impact on our perception of pain, and it's this kind of this melds into our course lecture on stress management, because it's all kind of the same thing. And it's the idea that emotional stress affects our body, and this is the basic premise of psychoneuroimmunology: how the mind affects the body, and also how the body affects the mind as well. Um, so this is the opposite. What we're talking about is pretty much the opposite of the idea of Cartesian duality, which is basically the kind of the basis of Western science for the most part. Descartes came up with that. He came up with that. I think, therefore I am. He was a contemporary of Galileo, who had been put under house arrest for scientific teachings. He was teaching that the Earth was rotating around the sun. That was in contract to the Catholic Church, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. So Descartes didn't want to get in trouble with the Catholic Church. He wanted to do autopsies. So he kind of wrote a series of treatises on why the mind and the body are two separate things. And his premise to the Pope was, you deal with the soul or the mind or whatever you want to call it. I only want to study the body. And he wrote a whole series of lectures about why the body and the mind are two separate things. And he said the two things meet together probably in the brain. Um, so that's kind of the foundation of Western science. Essentially, is that the mind or the soul or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, that's something different than real science, physiology. So uh, we're going to see some evidence that this really no longer applies. So psychoneuroimmunology, again, it's based on the discovery of endorphins and other neuropeptides. But you've probably heard the term endorphins before. It's the body's own morphine. Um, when endorphins are released, they result in feelings of euphoria, pain relief. Um, they're referred to as the biochemical correlates of emotion. So positive emotions, good ways to trigger endorphins. Probably one of the best ways is exercise. Obviously, sexual activity can work, and obviously, some people will choose to use alcohol or other substances to release endorphins, and that can work. But the problem is you can get addicted to it. Well, I guess you can get addicted to anything that releases endorphins, but you just have to be careful about what you choose to how you choose to release your endorphins. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Endorphins, they're not only in the brain, but they're also in the immune system. Okay, so this means that when endorphins are released, they're actually going to have a positive impact on our immune system. They're going to strengthen our immune system, and not just the immune system, but the endocrine system, the digestive system, cardiovascular system. So literally throughout the entire body. So what this means is that emotions are not just psychological. They're linked to chemical processes that take place in literally every part of our body. Okay, so emotions affect every cell in your body. That's a sign that's been verified scientifically. So, emotional fluctuations, when you have a lot of negative emotions, when you're stressed out, whatever it might be, that will influence whether or not you're going to get sick. They know that college students, when they're studying for final exams, are more likely to get sick. During generally stressful periods of time, people are more likely to get sick. So they actually tested this. They exposed people to a respiratory virus, just a cold virus, in a laboratory, and to a group of individuals. And the people that were exposed that had the highest levels of stress were the ones that were most likely to actually come down with that cold. So not everybody that is exposed to the same respiratory virus is going to get sick. Some people can build up their immune system through a variety of techniques so that they don't get as sick. I shouldn't say that, but it reduces the risk of getting sick from that virus. So, the immune system, just like the central nervous system, has memory and it has a capacity to learn. Intelligence is literally located in every cell of the body. So that traditional separation of mind and body really no longer applies. Um, and we have to remember it's not just the mind affecting the body; it's also how the body affects the mind. We usually equate mind-body with, how you can, how depression can cause illness, or how positive states can help recover from illness. But pain and injuries can lead to depression. I've known people that had back injuries from work or whatever it was, and it ended up, sinking them into a pretty deep depression. Heart disease is a leading risk factor for depression. So, some other things we need to consider. We talked about this already, seeing illness as a symptom that something is wrong. So we don't need to reiterate on that too much again. But, emotional health is physical health. Those two are really the same thing. Yeah, we need to consider emotional health as part of our overall health. Those two things are equally important. So it's great if you want to go out and exercise and eat healthy, but you really need to take care of your emotional health as well. And there are techniques that that we'll take a look at that can help with that. Okay, so main point, when somebody asks, when you see this on a test or on a homework assignment, what is psychoneuroimmunology? This is what you want to. This is it right here. Positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive emotions are going to have a positive impact on our health. It's going to have a positive impact on our immune system. It's going to keep us healthy. It's going to keep our heart healthy and our lungs healthy. Negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative emotions, distress, all of these things have a negative impact on health. Anger is one of the worst things that you can do for your physical health. I know it's just an emotional state, but it cripples your immune system. And it's not just anger, but that might be one of the worst. All right, so there's a lot of evidence, to back all this up. For at least 2 decades, maybe 3 decades, they've been researching this. And mind-body therapies can have a pretty positive impact on, heart disease, pain related to a variety of conditions, including arthritis and headaches. They've done a lot of work with cancer patients that can improve quality of life and improve mood. They can help with certain side effects from chemotherapy. So we're going to take a look at quite a few of these. We'll take a look at some pictures. Biofeedback is pretty cool. Pretty simple. I think these little things might cost $100 maybe. And they measure your skin temperature and maybe like moisture on your fingers as well. I don't know. That might be an indicator of stress or something. But the skin temperature, what happens when you're in a state of distress? The blood in your extremities moves to other parts of the body, and the temperature, the skin temperature on your fingers and your toes actually goes down a little bit. It gets a little bit colder, and this will measure that. So once you see that your temperature in your hand is going down, you do some breathing techniques or other relaxation techniques, and it will help the temperature increase a little bit. And that is exactly how a mood ring works. If anybody remembers these things, those of us that were around in the 70s, I think that you can still find these around, but they're kind of funky looking. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're lovable or romantic or anything like that, but it's essentially a stress test. It's when you see the top heart there in that middle picture, it's black, and it says stressed. And that's actually accurate. When the mood ring turns black, you're really stressed out. And then it goes to different shades, and up all the way up to romantic, of course, which is really just relaxed. And they have these things, biodots. So I think mood rings. I saw one at the aquarium actually a couple months ago, and it was like $10, something like that. But for $10, you can get like 100 biodots. You can find these online. Little dots that you put on right on your hand there. You see that and I mean, people might notice it, but it works the same way as a mood ring based on temperature, skin temperature of your hand. And you can see that this is actually an accurate portrayal of what the temperature, what the color is. So black is stressed and purple is deeply relaxed. And you can put these on and wear them throughout the day as you start to get stressed. Do some breathing techniques. Um, what you'll find is, towards the end of the day, if you wear this throughout the day, towards the end of the day, when you take a shower and you start loosening up, it starts to go to tranquil and then deeply relaxed. When I used to smoke years ago, I smoked a cigarette one time with this thing on, and I was calm at the time, and I smoked a cigarette and it turned black immediately. Not immediately, but over the next couple minutes. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I used to claim that I smoked to relax, but it probably was not really working. These things are a little bit more expensive. So the BioDots, again, I think that it's like $10 for like 100 little dots plus the encoder card, decoder card rather. And then these things are a little bit more expensive. These are probably $200 or $300, and it's just like a biofeedback system, and you can read about some of the benefits there. Again, maybe $300 for something like this. But I would say I would recommend it. If you have the money to spend, it's pretty useful. Just sitting down and meditating for a lot of people, including me, can be tricky. So having some of this technology actually is pretty useful, and you get a lot of the same benefits that you would for meditation using things like this. But it's just kind of a helpful resource. Um, I used this thing, a light sound machine. I've never used I've never, other than the biodots, I've never really used biofeedback machines, but I've used light sound machines, and it's based on ancient meditative practices. The lights that you see, they're little LED lights that flash on and off, and what they're supposed to mimic is, ancient practices where they would meditate around a fire, and when the light from the fire would flicker on their closed eyelids, it would induce an altered state of consciousness, and then combine that with repetitive sounds, like we talked about mantras for meditation, but they also oftentimes use drumming, like shamanic drumming, just that repetitive motion. And that's what the sound is. It's like a repetitive motion. And there's all kinds of different funky meditative things that you can put in for the sound. And then the lights flickering on and off. And again, it's just a pretty cool meditative assistant technology. And almost immediately you're plunged into like a deep meditative state. So it's pretty cool to check out. And the programs last anywhere from like 5 minutes to 30 minutes, something like that, and it just shuts off. I used to combine this with a couple other things. So these are like $100. You can get them for $100. Real nice ones, $300. Um, Creative imagery, again, we talked about this when we talked about meditation, so I'll go over it briefly. But this is a great book that I would highly recommend. And this is just kind of guided meditations that you can guide through yourself. And it's just using your imagination to kind of just help you relax a little bit. So there's these things, and then there's guided meditations where, like CDs that will actually read things like this off to you. This is stuff that you have to use your imagination yourself. I don't use this. I've talked to people that really enjoy it. Again, that website there, Tools for Wellness, is great. They have all this kind of stuff. These things are kind of expensive. I don't know. During the winter times, I get a little seasonal affective disorder. Sitting too much time inside and not enough time outside. I don't like the cold weather, so maybe I would benefit from something like this. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like full spectrum lighting. It's supposed to mimic the sun, so maybe there's vitamin D that you get from this. I honestly don't know. But if you're interested, you can do some more research on this. These kind of things these are some of the sillier kind of things that are out there, but these are probably based off of chakras, which we'll talk about in another section. And it's just they claim color psychology. There's a whole psychology behind using color. I personally would feel a little self-conscious walking around in the neighborhood with bright purple and pink glasses on, but maybe there's some benefit to. I shouldn't say that. There probably is some benefit to this. We'll talk more about chakra medicine, but some of these techniques I personally would probably not use. So I'm posting this link to this YouTube video for progressive muscle relaxation. If we were in class, this is the first thing I would start the class with. we would do a progressive muscle relaxation. So this is a YouTube video that you can watch that will, I'll post this presentation up there as a PowerPoint presentation. You could go to this, or just go to YouTube and search progressive muscle relaxation. I also have a file explaining how to do a progressive muscle relaxation under the CAM files, under the various files, and you'll find something on there. Hypnosis, again, not something that I've experimented with myself. One of my graduate professors was into hypnosis, and it's not the stage hypnosis where they have you barking like a dog or anything like that, but it's guided meditation essentially. It's a deep relaxation that they use, and then they teach people how to induce that deep relaxation by themselves. So it's supposed to be very effective for pain relief. There's a guy down at Drexel that was doing a lot of this to help people that were pretty severely handicapped, not mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, help them deal with the pain. And he had a lot of success with this. This is something I used years ago. I don't use it too much anymore. I use other techniques, but this is based off of energy medicine, and we'll talk more about energy medicine when we talk about Indian medicine and Chinese medicine. But in the West, we don't talk. In China, they talk about qi, the energy, and in India, they talk about prana. In the West, they refer to it generally as bioenergy, and they have techniques for helping to circulate bioenergy, and this is one of them. And I used this for quite a while, and it actually is pretty effective. It's pretty cool. You see that the picture to the right, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pads there. So the one in the middle that actually will go under your sacral area, like your tailbone area, and then the one connected to that goes under the back of your head, and then the small four ones connect to the 4 small ones connect to your hands and your feet. And after about 5 or 10 minutes or so, you just start to feel deeply relaxed, and then you just feel like a nice kind of subtle, I don't know how to explain it other than a warm kind of energy start to circulate around your body. It's kind of hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, but it's just a very deep relaxation technique. I used to combine this with the light sound machine, so you can imagine what that image must look like, with these things strapped to my hands and feet, and the light sound machine on my head. But it's a very deep relaxation, and it's a lot deeper than I personally can achieve just on relaxing on my own or meditating on my own. So some of these tools are pretty helpful, and this is probably the most the most interesting aspect of mind-body medicine and stress management and relaxation techniques that I've ever come across personally. I used one of these a couple weeks ago. Years ago, I used these, like 20 years ago, I used these for like a year period. I used it pretty consistently, every other week or so. And it was the most significant period of development in my life, I can say, honestly. If I had the resources, I would probably put one in my house. It's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt in water, so you float like a cork. The door closes, so there's no light, there's no sound. It's referred to as sensory deprivation, and the idea is to completely remove all external stimulus. And so, like I said, there's no gravity, there's no sound, there's no light. The water is heated to skin temperature, 93 degrees, so that you don't feel any fluctuations in temperature. Initially they started doing this back in the 50s. It was the precursor to NASA. They wanted to know what it would be like to float in outer space, what would happen to a person's mind, and obviously there were some concerns, but you would think that it would be stressful, but it's the complete opposite. It's been referred to as the most profound relaxation ever known to man. The way I would describe it is like a cheat sheet for meditation. I've used a lot of relaxation techniques. I do a lot of meditation, yoga. I've done some pretty funky, biotech or technology things. This is I've never come across anything like this. It immediately sends you into a deep, profound meditative state. It's just really, really interesting. There was a really trippy movie made in like 1980 or so, starring, I forget the guy's name, William Hurt maybe, where the movie was actually based off of this doctor, John Lilly, MD. Dr. Lilly liked to experiment with a variety of drugs, most specifically hallucinogens. I think he was dropping acid and going into the tank for like 6 to 8 hours at a time. So the guy was pretty far out there. He was a neuroscientist, and I can't. He might have been from this area, actually, from Philadelphia area at one point. But he was a neuroscientist, and he was doing a lot of studies on dolphin communication, things like that. And then he started experimenting with this, and it was the '60s, so they were, a lot of people were experimenting with different types of hallucinogens. The movie was based off of him, but it's like really far science fiction. But it's pretty there's some pretty interesting conversations in there. You might want to check it out if you might be interested. So people have in 1980 the Philadelphia Eagles and the Philadelphia Phillies introduced flotation tanks into the locker room. And I forget, I think the Phillies won the World Series that year, and the Eagles maybe they made it to the the Super Bowl. I think something like that. Robin Williams uses one. All kinds of actors use one. John Lennon used one to quit cocaine. It's very effective for addiction recovery. It's very effective for athletic performance, pain relief, heightened creativity, all kinds of stuff. So any benefit that we've talked about from meditation, it's this is you get this, but it's like a fivefold increase in effectiveness. It's just that profound. It's really cool. There is one in Philadelphia. It's expensive, which is the problem. It's like $60, I think, for an hour session. So that's part of the issue with these things. I think you can build one for like $3,000. So that was pretty much it for this one. I'm just going to ask you to finish off by reading this quote by John Dewey, and that'll do it. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.